Good afternoon. My name is Javier Vasquez. I'm with Microsoft's Federal Business. I'm here today in downtown Washington, D.C. with a special guest, David Oberhettinger. He's the Chief Knowledge Officer for National's JPL business. We're going to talk about knowledge management today. David, I have a few questions for you if you don't mind. We can talk about the exciting world of knowledge management. So tell me a little bit, what is knowledge management and where are we even talking about today?
Well, knowledge management is about countering organizational amnesia by capturing, retaining, and sharing knowledge for eventual reuse. That's important where we are at JPL because of very high-risk, one-of-a-kind type work that we do. You have one person who has knowledge, and then you have another person that needs knowledge without necessarily the two of them being aware of each other. And knowledge management is about bringing them together. Now, this requires a certain amount of cultural change, such that someone who just completed an important study will be motivated to think, maybe I ought to save this study somewhere other than just on my hard drive, so that other people in the future can reuse that knowledge. And reuse at JPL means not just saving money and schedule by being able to reuse knowledge that's already been developed, but also it reduces risk, because restoring knowledge that has been lost has not been subjected to the ground test and spaceflight validation that the new knowledge, restored knowledge, would have had. Now, this requires some effort, and it requires, I think, a value change even. But I think it's feasible. I mean, one example is in my municipality some years ago, they began source selection of household trash. So you had one barrel for the garbage, one barrel for recyclables, and a third for garden waste. And it's somewhat inconvenient for individuals. It's great on the social level, and everyone agrees that should be done. But for the individuals, it's a certain amount of inconvenience. But you get to the point where people feel guilty if they don't separate their recyclables, if they throw it in with the garbage. And that's what knowledge management is, trying to get people to act as knowledge champions.
So definitely there's a cultural element there for sure. So how is that important specifically? How's knowledge management really specifically important at JPL? And tell me a little bit of how the office or how your role came about as a Chief Knowledge Officer.
Yes. JPL will typically build a single copy of their product. It may cost $1 billion, and it's designed to go where nothing has ever been before. So let me give you two examples of why knowledge is particularly important at JPL. The Spirit rover has been operated on Mars for 6 years. It was only designed the last 90 days, but it operated in the Gusev crater for 6 years. Its identical twin, the Opportunity rover, so far has been operating for 13 years in the much more benign terrain of the Meridianum Planum, the plains of Meridiani. So if you add to take that 13 years and you add the 1 year it took to get to Mars, you have a 14-year mission. But it was probably 90% of the risk was in the last 7 minutes of landing on Mars, what we call entry, descent, and landing. You know, the other 14 years, no big deal. That 7 minutes where most of the risk is. It turns out it's very difficult to land on Mars. We know how to land on the moon with zero gravity. Landing on Earth is pretty pedestrian. But the landing on Mars is extremely difficult. And the second example I wanted to use was when something goes wrong with one of our spacecraft. If we try to send up a command to fix it, if the spacecraft is in the vicinity of Mars, it may take 20 minutes for the command to get there. If it's in the outer planets, it may take hours for the corrective command to go up. So we build a lot of autonomy into our spacecraft, a lot of onboard fault correction. So, okay, if we didn't have a mission to Mars every 5 years or so, we would probably lose the capability to land on Mars, simply because the EDL, entry, descent, and landing, how you land on Mars, that knowledge would be lost. Similar for the spacecraft autonomy. Now, in just about any business I can think of, if you lose a key person, you go out and hire another. JPL is the only organization I can think of where no one else does what we do. Who else lands on Mars? Who else goes into deep space? A lot of people in orbit, putting out communication satellites, military satellites, orbiting Earth. But we're really the only organization that knows how to go out into deep space. So that's why knowledge management is critical for us, because people retire, you lose people. Now, how we got into knowledge management was the field was kind of sprung up in the 90s. And back around 2012, there was a recommendation given to NASA that each center should have a chief knowledge officer, and that they should take active measures to capture and preserve knowledge, to act as knowledge champions. And so we really had a lot of activities ongoing that could be termed knowledge management. For example, we had a lessons learned committee that had been meeting since 1984 on a weekly basis. So lessons learning was considered very important back then in '84. It's still important.
Sure.
Because if we make mistakes, we want to make new mistakes. We don't want to repeat old mistakes. That's a lot easier for the public to accept if we make, since we're doing something high risk, never been done before. If we make a new mistake, so we had a lot of activities that weren't necessarily called knowledge management, but we started making a concerted effort. That was, in JPL's case, I can't really speak for the other 9 NASA centers, but they also have been doing very important things. But we did get a lot of support at JPL for that sort of activity.
That's just fascinating. Just the power of knowledge management to really make missions more effective, to really improve outcomes, and to just do things that have never been done before. Just fascinating. So I think you just have one of the coolest jobs in business here. So talk to me a little bit about how knowledge management really relates to government or other non-government organizations as well. It was a great story for NASA. And these are, listen, we all love NASA and the work that JPL does, and we're all fascinated since we were children. So tell us a little bit more about how other agencies can benefit, or other non-government organizations.
Other government agencies and technology companies are also very knowledge-centric. That it used to be that the primary assets that companies held were their machinery and buildings. Today, particularly in aerospace, your company, it's other than the desks and the filing cabinet, you don't even have filing cabinets anymore. Right? It's pretty much what's in people's heads.
It's digital filing cabinet.
It's intellectual capital that's important. So you also have that. Now, what can companies do? They can share their approaches to knowledge management, because some organizations have found certain things they've done to be useful. One problem, I found a lot of in information technology, they speak a lot about information systems. And I'm not convinced or knowledge systems. There is such thing as information systems. I'm not convinced there's such a thing as knowledge systems. I suspect maybe the best knowledge management might have been done by the Royal Navy in the 19th century. You have these very isolated ships, no internet, no computers on board even. You had means of transferring knowledge from the senior people aboard the ship to the junior people. The midshipmen, who were teenagers, were taught how to use the sextant to find their latitude. Probably, it's very possible the only book on board the ship was the captain's manual of naval regulations, I suspect. But everything else, they had a very effective way of transferring knowledge throughout the organization, in this case, a ship on water, without any knowledge systems. So I think tools are very important, and for example, Microsoft has been very helpful to JPL with tools. We developed a system called JPL2, similar to U2, as a partnership between JPL, Microsoft Research, now Azure Media Services, and NASA headquarters IT labs. And it was the first system that I'm aware of where anyone at JPL could upload a video, and using the Azure indexer, back then when we started, it was called Mavis, it would index video, do speech-to-text conversion, index it, and such that anyone watching the video would see a transcript of the text as they were watching the video. But the very powerful aspect of it was that the video was completely key text searchable, which is really game-changing because now you can use video like you never were comfortable doing before. So you could have recorded every technical interchange meeting. Of course, back then that would be very expensive. Today we have inexpensive cameras, video cameras that are on your hip, in your purse, and don't require special training to generate videos. So we have those tools, but more important, you don't have to sit through 100 hours of video or 1,000 hours of video to find the answer to the question, now why did JPL set the value of that software alarm to off for launch? You probably have a PowerPoint going into a meeting that explained the options, laid it all out, but I bet you no one went back and edited the PowerPoint to document the decision and why it was the decision. And if they had, it wouldn't capture the full emotional flavor of that decision, how reluctant they were, how comfortable they were with the decision that was actually made.
Here's some of the decision criteria, and if it was contentious, why did we go with A or B instead?
Exactly.
Wow, fascinating.
Now you have that capability.
Well, I tell you what, thank you so much for the partnership with us in developing these technologies. Thank you for being such a great partner, just general to the technology industry. I have one last question for you, and it really comes down to risk. So we have it sounds like an organization like yourself that would benefit from using knowledge management. For organizations that really haven't invested in it, what are the risks for not actually taking knowledge management seriously and making it a core priority for them?
Well, I think they lose their competitive advantage. Any company probably has something that they do better than their competition that causes them to survive against competition. And usually that involves some kind of knowledge. The JPL engineering knowledge with Coca-Cola Company, probably not engineering. They make colored sugar water, but they're probably the best, certainly the best in their field, maybe the best in the world in marketing. So if they were to lose key knowledge about how they market their product, now that might impact their survival. For JPL, we're charged with uniformly high-risk missions. If an element of a mission is not risky, for example, in electronics, what we call a bus, the section of the spacecraft that has all the electronics in it. If it's simply designing a computer and the related communications equipment, we may just subcontract that out to another company because that's not high risk. But we generally do missions that have never been done before. So, our first rover on Mars used an airbag to land on Mars. The last rover that landed on Mars was far too heavy for an airbag, so we had to come up with an idea, concept for a sky crane that hovers off the surface of Mars and lowered a rover about the size and weight of a Mini Cooper down onto the surface of Mars while it's hovering, and then cut the cables and fly off, crash downrange, or it won't contaminate the landing site. So that capability was something that was thought to be a one-time thing. The project manager of that Mars exploration rover project that built Curiosity didn't know that there would be a follow-on project called Mars 2020 that would build an almost identical rover. But even if he had known, he probably would not have cared a great deal about saving the knowledge to control the risk, you're asking about risk, to the next mission to Mars, simply because he was judged on his ability to get that rover to launch on time and schedule. You know, I mean, because if you're 2 weeks late in your launch window, you may have to wait 2 years before you get another opportunity. So he was concerned to get the follow-on project, even if he'd have known about it. Yeah, he would have sought to preserve knowledge that was needed, but it wouldn't have been a high priority. So that's the sort of risk you get that's involved there. We don't worry that much about competition because no one else does what we do. And if they did, we welcome them, frankly.
Sure.
But yeah, we do have that other risk.
Well, I tell you what, I'm fascinated by what you do. I think the 13-year-old boy in me just admires the work that you do. Thank you for everything you do in exploration and science, and thank you for being such a good partner to us and Microsoft and the industry in general. With that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you for your time. And
Thank you.
Thank you so much for participating today. Thank you.